Hi everybody, my name is Nicole Salazar and today I will be giving my presentation for our ethical dilemma. Today I'm going to be talking about a personal ethical issue that had occurred while at my current workplace. So basically I live in a small town, so basically everybody knows everybody. So I recently started working at a center that specializes in autistic services as a registered behavior therapist and technician. And after a few months of working with one of my clients, I noticed a familiar face in the lobby, and not just the clients or my coworkers. I have a second job. I work at a restaurant, and my boss was actually my client's grandmother. Um, However, I was unaware, like before even working there or working at my other job, that her grandson was diagnosed with autism, or nothing of that ever came about. So, one day at work, at my second job at the restaurant, she started to ask me about his therapy services, and she was mentioning his name. She was mentioning like other people I work with, like different, the progress that he's been making or hasn't been making. And so she was asking me about his services. And as this was going on, I was thinking to myself, this can raise a lot of issues. I need to be very careful of what I say or what I don't say, because I have to protect his confidentiality. I have to protect his information. Like, those are the only limits we're supposed to talk about. Those are within the center's parameters, or if at their house, if I was conducting a session. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next, topic, which were the violations. So it's really important when you are, or when I have been put in this situation, to identify the ethical violations. In order to do so, you have to refer to the Professional and Ethical Compliance Code for Behavior Analysts. That way, that'll help you identify the violations, give you explanations of each one, and to determine the disciplinary action if needed, depending on the situation. So the potential violations, or the most important ones that I noticed, or that was going through my head at the time, were conflict of interest, maintaining confidentiality, and ensuring the rights and prerogatives of the client. Now, since I didn't talk about any of his information or his sessions, or mention my client's name, there were no violations that occurred. However, in this situation, this is the most this is the biggest ordeal I've had so far working at the center. So I figured it was really important to learn how to manage a situation, or if something like this would ever come back, or come back to itself. Yeah, for lack of better words, I guess. So the first one is conflict of interest. As a registered behavior technician, I must be sensitive to potentially harmful effects, short-term and long-term. It is really important that I avoid multiple relationships at all costs, and being that I also live in a very small town, it's almost inevitable that I'm going to run into people I know. But given my job and given my, policies, procedures, and, the ethics code, I have to follow that. So there are certain restrictions that I need to be, that are practiced or that are set in place. Continuing on, I must remain truthful, and there's anything that were to happen as far as, client's health, or, his, as far as his safety, then those are certain things I can report. However, I can't just freely talk about his information in the public. So, yeah. Oh, and to reiterate, as I just said, I must protect their health. I have to maintain professional guidelines, record accurate data, and other important duties within my competence. So, with that being said, I have to practice those in and out of my center when I am, on and off duty. So it's important to remember those in order to well, maintain my professional credentials, and in order for them, to trust me, to keep my job, to really be someone that they can rely on all the time, not just because they want me to tell them something. Um, so yeah, let's see here. And then the next one that I was going to talk about was maintaining client confidentiality. So this is a huge value, because even if the parents are wanting to know about information about their kiddo, or they had any questions about programming, or I don't know, scheduling, billing, I don't know, anything like that, it's really, really important that I discuss that information within my agency or my center's limits. um, with that being said, my the restaurant I also worked at was not a proper establishment to talk to them about. And even though my boss, or his grandmother, was comfortable talking about that information, it's also really important to remember that the client didn't also give me consent, and neither did his parents. Or, furthermore, like talking about following through with the procedures. I can't break those rules. Um, so yeah, so there's always just a time and place to discuss therapy, and that just wasn't the place. And so with that being said, I had to withhold the significant information from her, or I just kindly nodded and told her that I can only discuss this at the center, or after our session, if she had any questions, she could talk to me or directly call the BCBA, or excuse me, talk to me at the center or directly call the BCBA. Um, yes. And then um, the last violation, and there could be more violations, but the three that stuck out in my mind, the last potential violation were the rights and prerogatives of the client. So when it comes to the rights and prerogatives of the client, it is important that these are protected by the healthcare providers or therapists, behavior technicians, to ensure their client's privacy and the privileges, and to make sure that they're secure. There's a lot of trust that, and a lot of responsibility that are put on my shoulders. We have to make sure that we are within our competence and that we are following those rules. So that being said, we have to make sure that we maintain client dignity, maintain their safety, prevent any breaches or potential harmful effects in the future, or I guess in the present as well, depending on the situation. And to make sure that none of their information is overshadowed by public interest. So, like, after my boss asked me about my client, a lot of my coworkers knew her grandson, and I knew she had grandchildren. I just didn't know it was gonna be my client, and so they started asking questions, like, and making comments about how, oh wow, you work with so and so's grandson. What's it like? Is it hard? What do you see throughout the day? And it was still kind of make a snowball effect, and I continued. I smiled at them, told them again that I was a breach of confidentiality. It's an ethical violation. I can't talk about those any of his information, and so forth. And a failure to do it, like to protect the client, would result in a failure in an unethical and unprofessional behavior. In an unethical and behavioral violation. Excuse me. Yes, and then as far as determining boundaries of competence, which is another thing that I had talked about in my paper, is that I must be aware of the ethical code, policies, and procedures of my workplace. If at any time there was a point where I questioned something or was unaware of, a possible ethical issue, it's really important to always review the ethical codes, procedures to implement during this time, and to practice these within the parameters, as I mentioned before. So the competence that I am able to, in order to continue my competence and to practice my competence, I mainly consists of education, so the continuous studying, seminars, even now going through with the BCBA, keeping yourself on top of terminology and training procedures as well, because those are all very important, especially when you're working with other people and their life is literally in your hands. It also consists of training, as I said, ongoing training as well, experiences in the workplace, consulting other people, asking advice from your supervisor, and again, just referring to the code. Some possible solutions, and feelings after this entire issue include the solutions were how to prevent the ethical dilemma before it happens. So I guess in my case, my ethical dilemma, the consequences weren't negative per se. My boss was understandable and, apologized to me after the fact, even though she still kind of continued to talk about it and did other times after that instance, but she was okay with it. So I guess there was really no problem that occurred or a negative outcome or per se. But to prevent an ethical dilemma is important, or, to, I guess, identify the dilemma. It's important to identify the incident, identify any conflict elements that had occurred between person A and person B or C or D, to make ethical decisions, to really go through the process. Don't jump right away, but you do have to think kind of fast in these situations, thinking about, all right, what's right, what can I say, what can I not say, how to handle it. Justify the decisions, justify the implications, and justify alternative solutions. As far as my feelings, this was a few months back, but being a new registered behavior technician, I was somewhat uncomfortable. I guess this was my first, ethical violation ethical dilemma outside of work. So I was new. I was kind of fresh in my mind. I was thinking fast. My job was somewhat being exposed, and I guess my client kind of was, even though I guess I didn't have any control over that part. But yeah, like I said, and then other coworkers started asking about it, so a lot kind of happened at once. I was concerned for the client's confidentiality and rights, for sure. I understood, the guardians can talk about their loved ones' services, but I don't have that right to do so unless I absolutely need to, in case of an emergency situation or, anything like that. So it was really, I was very, I guess, taken back by it, because I didn't realize that she was so open about his therapy, even though she had mentioned before that she's noticed progress and everything, or noticed progress. So I guess I was kind of taken back by that. And then finally, I was, in the midst of all this, I was still trying to uphold my credibility as a professional. So while I was kind of anxious about what was going to happen next, or what I would say, or what I didn't say right or wrong, I was remaining very sensitive to my client's information, and I continued to respect his rights. And it was really important for me that I still maintain a good relationship with my boss, and with my client and the rest of his family. So I didn't want to just, I guess, put her questions in the back burner. I still acknowledged her excitement. I acknowledged her, I couldn't acknowledge her questions, I guess. I answered it by saying I can't talk about it, but I was very happy she felt that way, but it didn't mention anything else besides that. But yeah, and this was my ethical dilemma. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good semester, and thanks for watching.